So in this recording, we're going to look at the difference between insert processing and the creation of auxiliary sends for effects. So learning when to use something as an insert versus using something as a send. So I've got a simple recording of a drum kit here. There's nothing too complicated about it. So just play back the raw recording. Okay, so just a collection of mics on a drum kit. So when we want to process any of these audio tracks, or any of these channels, should I say, because we are looking at a mixer now, then we can either apply processing as an insert or we can create sends. Now, to work out which kind of processing pathway you should use, it's very simple. If the processing that you are applying is completely specific to that one channel or track, then you're okay to use an insert. So a classic example would be EQ. Let me just solo the snare top. So if I wanted to EQ my snare top mic, let's hear it. So let's say we wanted to, find that ring and work with that ring in some sort of way, then we would do that as an insert. Equalizers are always used as inserts because essentially when you're using an equalizer, you want to process the entirety of what's coming down that channel and that channel alone. You're not really wanting to apply this same EQ anywhere else. So it's a localized instance of a processor that is dedicated to the snare top mic in this case. So I have an equalizer here, so I can go and find this ring. Usually to find frequencies, I would just turn up the Q, so make the bandwidth very narrow and put it into boost. So you can see I'm varying the Q there, but if I sweep that around, I'll find this ring sooner rather than later. There it is. And then if I put that into cut, it's attenuated that ring. Okay, so that's an example of using an EQ just to be specific about EQing one of the mics. And I can go through, all of my mics and do the same. So look at the kick in. Get the slap of it there if I wanted that. Take a bit of the woolliness out of it. Give it a little bit of a boost in the low end. Okay, so I can just keep going through all of my channels, and also bear in mind that when you're EQing, it is actually good to EQ in context. You can tweak your EQs when you're listening to everything else going on at the moment, because the EQ of one track really has to be decided in context with what else is going on around it. That's something for a deeper discussion about EQ. But essentially you get the concept. Likewise, if it was something like a compressor, so let me put a compressor on my snare top mic, same deal. So let me go and find something that you've got, which would be under Dynamics, which would be the Avid Pro compressor. Okay, so that now has a compressor on it. That would also be an insert. Where people tend to get confused is when they use effects like reverbs or delays or modulation effects like chorus or flanging or so on. So you might say, I want some reverb on this snare now, so I'll just go and get a reverb plugin and I'll put it on my snare. And then I'll just play with the mix control. Okay, and there's my reverb. Now look, that's going to give you the result of giving you a reverb, but it's actually not the right way to use reverbs. When we set up reverbs in a mix, we need to be able to have a level of global control over those at a point in the mixer. We don't want all of our reverbs hiding amongst plugins for the whole mix, or it becomes extremely unwieldy to adjust reverbs across the whole mix. Also, every time you use a reverb uses quite a lot of processing power. You won't see it on this session because it's very light, but essentially in my system usage, when I'm looking at my CPU usage, every time I put in reverbs, so let me just stack up a whole bunch more. You'll just see I put a bunch of, this is like an Abbey Road Chambers reverb plugin, but see how with all of these additional reverbs now, I've just used 50% or 54% of my CPU. So that's no good. We can't mix sessions of scale while we are instantiating reverb plugins across every channel like this. So let me get rid of those. All right, reverbs should not be used as inserts, as a general rule. If I want to put a reverb on the snare, this is how I would do it. So let me go to my setups menu, to the I/O setups, and I want to choose my bus tab, and here I will see all of the buses that are currently in the session, and I want to create a dedicated bus that's going to be my reverb send. So I'm just going to create one stereo. I'm just going to call it reverb short, and I won't auto create subpaths at this point. Go create. I'll just move that up to the top so it's easier to find when I'm in my menu. Okay, so this is going to be a bus that's going to take my reverb send. At the other side, I'm going to create a aux input channel. So track, new, stereo, aux input, and I'm going to call this reverb short return, RT. And then I'm going to set the input to that to be the reverb short bus. On that, I'm going to then put in my reverb again. And because it's sitting on an aux input channel and it's going to be fed by a send, I need to make sure that my mix control is on 100%. That is extremely important. You must make sure it's on 100%. So now let's send something from this snare top mic across to this reverb. So I just go to the sends tab here to send number one, and I go to bus and I go to reverb short, and then that will create a breakaway strip. And if I push some level through this, it should go to my reverb processor. Okay, there it is. And obviously the amount of reverb can be controlled by the amount that I send to it. So there you see the first reason for putting something as a send and not as an insert, because I can simply be varying my send levels to the reverb to be able to control the amount of reverb that's on that snare. Perhaps it's a little bit more obvious if I pop out this sends tab here so that it becomes a mini fader. So if I hold down the command key and click on the little button on the left hand side, it pops down this first sends tab to give you a mini fader. So let me just show you that. Okay, so now if I wanted to go and put some reverb on my toms as well, here's my rack and floor, shift option, do to all, and just send these to my reverb short send as well. And then just use the mini fader if I want to, likewise, just to send a little bit of reverb to those. Okay, so that's now put some reverb on my toms. And you can see here immediately the advantage of doing this. Now I'm using the same reverb plugin, which is it's just a short reverb that is fine for more than just my snare. If I was to look at my system usage, I've still only used this one plugin, but I've now got both my snare top and my toms going into the same reverb, which kind of makes sense because they're part of the same kit. Although sometimes you do want to have a different reverb on your snare than you might have to something else. So let's have a look at if I wanted to just have another slightly different reverb on, let's say, my kick drum. So let's do it again. I'm going to go to maybe just put a room on my kick. So go to Setups menu, I/O, and then I'm going to create a new path, another stereo path, and I'm going to call this reverb room. Okay, and then that's now, I'm going to put that up alongside reverb short and go OK. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here, and I'm going to go to track, new stereo aux input. So I'm creating a new aux input channel for my reverb processor, and I'm just going to call this reverb room. Okay, so we'll put a different reverb on this one. So we'll use a deverb. Okay, and then I'm just going to choose like a room for this one. I'm going to make it quite short. I'm going to make the input to that the reverb room, and then I'm going to go to my kick channel and go onto this. I can do it on the same tab if I want to. Reverb room. Okay, so the kick inside mic now. You can hear that room now, right? Okay, so now you can see I've got two reverb sends, and if I wanted to send something else to that room reverb, I could also just do the same thing to pull up a send here, and then as long as I'm sending it to reverb room here, then it will reach this reverb and not that reverb. And then as I'm sort of balancing across the whole mix, I might be happy with the relative amounts of sends. If I want to play with just how wet the whole kit sounds, I can just adjust these return faders now. So you can see how this is a far better way to do reverb sends than putting them on as inserts. Just recapping why that is, it's basically more DSP efficient. So I don't have 4 reverb plugins or 3 reverb plugins going that are all set to the same reverb when I could be using one. So, you know, on my system usage, I'm not pushing my CPU. Secondly, just from a mixing point of view, you get far more control over reverbs if you are able to create sends to them and then be able to balance their return levels globally in the mixer. Otherwise, you could imagine having to just go through on a complex mix. You go, there's too much reverb on this mix in general, and you'd be having to go into every single insert that you had in your mix of a reverb processor and pulling back the mix control. So it's just simply not workable. The standard maneuver is to create all of your reverbs and your delays as sends and not to be putting them as inserts on your channels, because that's really not the right way to go about doing it.